What if I told you that the voice in your head, the one you trust most, the one that analyzes every situation and tells you what's logical, what makes sense, what you should do next, is actually your biggest enemy? What if that rational, calculating mind you've relied on your entire life has been systematically deceiving you, while the emotions you've been taught to suppress and ignore are the only things telling you the truth? I know how that sounds. Trust me, I get it. We've been conditioned our entire lives to believe that thinking is superior to feeling, that logic trumps emotion, that the smart move is always to push down those messy, inconvenient feelings and let our brilliant minds take control. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Your brain is a master manipulator, and it's been playing you this whole time. 3 years ago, I was living what looked like the perfect life on paper. Great job, nice apartment, impressive social circle. My brain kept telling me I should be happy, that this was exactly what success looked like, that any dissatisfaction I felt was just me being ungrateful or unrealistic. But every morning, I'd wake up with this crushing weight in my chest, this inexplicable sadness that I couldn't shake. My emotions were screaming that something was wrong, but my brain kept overruling them with logical explanations and rational justifications. And that's when I discovered something that completely shattered everything I thought I knew about human psychology. Something that neuroscientists have been quietly studying for decades, but somehow never made it into mainstream conversation until now. Your emotions aren't the enemy of good decision-making. They're actually your most sophisticated guidance system, more accurate than any GPS, more reliable than any algorithm, more truthful than any analysis your conscious mind could ever produce. Meanwhile, that rational brain you trust so much, it's basically a used car salesman in a lab coat, constantly trying to sell you on stories that serve its own agenda rather than your actual well-being. Now, before you click away thinking this is some new age emotional mumbo-jumbo, let me show you the hard science behind why your brain lies to you every single day, and why learning to decode your emotional truth is the most practical skill you could ever develop. Here's what's actually happening inside your head right now. Your brain receives about 11 million bits of information every second through your senses. 11 million. But here's the kicker. Your conscious mind can only process about 40 bits of that information. 40. That means your brain is filtering out 99.9996% of reality and then presenting you with this tiny, heavily edited version of what's actually happening around you. But it gets worse. Your brain doesn't just filter information randomly. It actively selects and distorts information to fit the stories it wants to tell you, the beliefs it wants to maintain, and the identity it wants to preserve. It's like having a personal editor who's constantly rewriting your life story to make you the hero, even when you're clearly the villain, or to make everything seem fine, even when your house is literally on fire. This is called cognitive bias, and your brain has over 200 different varieties of it. Confirmation bias makes you see evidence for what you already believe while ignoring everything that contradicts it. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you trapped in situations that aren't working because you've already invested so much. Rationalization helps you create elaborate justifications for decisions you made for completely different reasons. Your emotions, on the other hand, don't lie. They can't lie. They're your body's direct response to what's actually happening in your environment and your life. When you feel anxious, there's usually something genuinely threatening your well-being. When you feel excited, there's something genuinely aligned with your values and desires. When you feel that gut-wrenching sensation that something's off, something is actually off, even if your brain can't figure out what it is yet. But we've been taught to dismiss these signals as irrational, as weaknesses, as obstacles to clear thinking. We've been told that mature, successful people don't let emotions cloud their judgment. What a brilliant scam. It's like convincing someone to ignore their smoke detector because the sound is annoying. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Sarah, a marketing executive, had been dating someone for 2 years. On paper, he was perfect. Successful, attractive, shared her interests, got along with her friends and family. Her brain kept telling her this was the relationship she should want. that she was lucky to have found someone so compatible, that any doubts she had were just fear of commitment or unrealistic expectations from romantic movies. But every time he touched her, every time he said he loved her, every time they made plans for the future, she felt this hollow sensation in her stomach. Not butterflies, not nervousness, but something that felt like grief. Her emotions were trying to tell her that despite all the logical compatibility, there was no genuine connection, no real intimacy, no authentic love between them. Her brain kept overruling these feelings with rational arguments. Love isn't supposed to be like the movies. Compatibility is more important than passion. You're being too picky. This is what adult relationships look like. But her emotions knew the truth. She was in love with the idea of him, not with him. She was choosing security over authenticity, and it was slowly killing something essential inside her. It took her another 1.5 years to finally listen to what her emotions had been telling her from the beginning. When she finally ended the relationship, she felt this incredible sense of relief, like she could breathe again for the first time in years. Her brain had kept her trapped in a situation that looked right but felt wrong, while her emotions had been accurately detecting the absence of genuine connection the entire time. This isn't just about relationships, though. This pattern shows up everywhere. The job that pays well but makes you feel dead inside. The friend group that's impressive but leaves you feeling lonely. The life path that makes sense on paper but feels like you're living someone else's dream. Your brain will always find ways to rationalize staying in these situations because change is scary, uncertainty is uncomfortable, and admitting you've been wrong about something important threatens your sense of identity. But your emotions will keep sending you signals that something needs to shift, something needs to change, something isn't working. The tragedy is that most of us have been so thoroughly trained to ignore these emotional signals that we've essentially become deaf to our own inner guidance system. We've learned to numb ourselves with distractions, to analyze our feelings away with logic, to push through emotional discomfort instead of investigating what it's trying to tell us. But here's what happens when you start paying attention to your emotional truth instead of just your mental story. You begin to make decisions that actually align with who you are and what you need, rather than who you think you should be or what you think you should want. You start recognizing patterns and problems much earlier, before they become crises. You develop what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between subtle emotional states and understand their specific messages. Most importantly, you stop living your life based on other people's definitions of success, happiness, and fulfillment, and start creating a life that actually feels authentic to you. Not the you that your family wants you to be, not the you that society rewards, not the you that your brain thinks you should be, but the real you that your emotions have been trying to protect and guide all along. Now, I'm not saying you should make every decision based purely on how you feel in the moment. That's just as problematic as ignoring your emotions entirely. What I'm talking about is learning to use your emotions as data, as valuable information about what's really happening in your life and what you actually need. Think of it this way. Your brain is like a GPS that's been hacked. It's confidently giving you directions, but it's actually leading you to the wrong destination. Your emotions are like that friend in the passenger seat who's been to this place before, pointing out landmarks and saying, "Something doesn't feel right about this route." But you keep ignoring them because you trust the technology more than human intuition. The problem is that your brain's primary job isn't to make you happy or fulfilled. Its job is to keep you alive and maintain the status quo. It's a survival machine, not a thriving machine. So when your emotions detect that you're slowly dying inside from a soul-crushing job, your brain steps in with perfectly logical reasons why you should stay. The economy is tough. You need the health insurance. Starting over at your age would be risky. All technically true. All completely missing the point that you're trading your life force for false security. Your brain is also obsessed with being right. It would rather be right than happy. It would rather maintain a consistent story about who you are and how the world works than admit that maybe, just maybe, you've been wrong about something fundamental. This is why people stay in toxic relationships for decades. why they pursue careers that drain their souls, why they maintain friendships that make them feel terrible about themselves. But your emotions don't care about being right. They only care about what's actually happening right now, in this moment, in your body, in your life. They're like a direct hotline to your deepest wisdom, bypassing all the mental gymnastics and elaborate justifications your brain loves to create. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Your brain doesn't just lie to you about external situations. It lies to you about your own emotions. It reframes them, reinterprets them, minimizes them, or explains them away entirely. You feel angry, but your brain tells you you're just tired. You feel sad, but your brain convinces you you're being dramatic. You feel excited about something, but your brain immediately lists all the reasons why it's impractical or unrealistic. This emotional gaslighting is so pervasive that most people have completely lost touch with what they actually feel. They know what they think about their feelings. They know what they think they should feel. They know what their feelings mean according to their mental framework. But they've forgotten how to simply be with an emotion and let it deliver its message. I learned this the hard way during what I now call my year of living dishonestly. I had convinced myself I was happy in a relationship that was slowly eroding my sense of self. Every argument, every moment of disconnect, every time I felt unheard or unseen, my brain would swoop in with explanations. All relationships have problems. You're being too sensitive. This is just a rough patch. You should be grateful someone loves you. But my body kept score. I started having trouble sleeping. My appetite disappeared. I felt anxious all the time but couldn't figure out why. I was getting sick more often. My creative energy vanished. These weren't random symptoms. They were my emotions expressing themselves through my physical body because I refused to listen to them any other way. The breaking point came when I realized I was afraid to come home to my own apartment. Not because anything dramatic was happening, but because the environment felt emotionally toxic in a way my brain couldn't articulate, but my body understood perfectly. That fear was my emotional truth, trying to save me from a situation that looked fine on the surface, but was actually destroying me from the inside out. When I finally started paying attention to what I was actually feeling instead of what I thought I should be feeling, everything changed. Not overnight, not easily, but profoundly. I began to see how many decisions I'd made based on mental stories rather than emotional truth. How many opportunities I'd missed because my brain talked me out of things that excited me. How many red flags I'd ignored because they didn't fit my logical framework of how things should work. Your emotions are constantly scanning your environment for threats and opportunities that your conscious mind might miss. They're picking up on micro-expressions, tone of voice, energy dynamics, and subtle patterns that your analytical brain is too slow and clunky to process. When you walk into a room and immediately feel uncomfortable, that's not paranoia or social anxiety. That's your emotional intelligence detecting something your rational mind hasn't figured out yet. When you meet someone and feel an instant connection, that's not wishful thinking or projection. That's your emotional radar recognizing compatibility at a level deeper than surface characteristics. When you have a gut feeling about a business opportunity, a living situation, or a major life decision, that's not irrationality. That's your entire emotional database running calculations based on patterns and experiences your conscious mind can't access. But here's the crucial part. Your emotions aren't just giving you information about external situations. They're also giving you information about your own values, needs, and authentic desires. When something makes you feel energized and alive, that's your emotional guidance system telling you you're moving in alignment with who you really are. When something makes you feel drained and depleted, that's your internal compass pointing away from that path. Your brain, meanwhile, is often working from outdated programming. It's still operating on beliefs you formed when you were 5 years old, still trying to get approval from people who don't matter, still avoiding risks that aren't actually risky anymore. It's like running current software on an operating system from 1995. It might technically work, but it's slow, glitchy, and completely inadequate for what you're trying to accomplish with your life. This is why so many people feel stuck, confused, or like they're living someone else's life. They're making decisions based on mental frameworks that don't actually serve them, while ignoring the emotional guidance that could lead them toward genuine fulfillment and authentic success. The solution isn't to throw logic out the window and make every decision based on impulse. The solution is to learn how to integrate your emotional intelligence with your analytical capabilities, to use your emotions as a sophisticated data collection system and your brain as a processing unit that helps you understand and act on that information wisely. But first, you have to learn to recognize when your brain is lying to you and how to tune back into the emotional truth you've been trained to ignore. So how do you actually start distinguishing between your brain's elaborate fiction and your emotions' unfiltered truth? How do you develop the skill to catch your mind in the act of deceiving you while learning to trust the guidance system you've been ignoring your entire life? The first step is recognizing your brain's favorite tricks. Pay attention to the language it uses when it's trying to override your emotional signals. Notice when you hear yourself saying things like, "I should feel grateful," "I'm probably just being too sensitive," or "I need to be more realistic." These are red flags that your analytical mind is trying to talk you out of what you're actually experiencing. Your brain loves to use words like should, need to, have to, and supposed to. These aren't descriptions of reality. They're attempts to impose some external standard on your internal experience. When you catch yourself using this language, pause and ask, "But what do I actually feel about this situation right now?" Another telltale sign that your brain is lying to you is when your explanations become overly complicated. Your emotions deliver simple, direct messages. "This feels wrong." "I don't trust this person." "This excites me." Your brain, when it's trying to override these signals, creates elaborate theories and multi-layered justifications that sound intellectual but feel hollow. I remember sitting in a coffee shop trying to convince myself that a business partnership that made me feel uneasy was actually a great opportunity. I had filled 3 pages in my notebook with pros and cons, market analysis, and logical arguments for why this deal made sense. But buried underneath all that mental noise was one simple emotional truth. Something about this person felt dishonest. 6 months later, when they tried to steal my clients and intellectual property, I realized my emotions had been right from day one. Your body is also constantly giving you information that your brain either ignores or reinterprets. Tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest, that sinking feeling in your stomach, the way your energy shifts when certain people enter the room. These aren't random physical sensations, they're emotional data being transmitted through your nervous system. Start paying attention to these somatic signals. When you're in a conversation and suddenly feel exhausted, that's information. When you're considering a decision and your breathing becomes shallow, that's information. When you think about a particular path forward and feel expansion in your chest versus contraction, that's your emotional guidance system giving you feedback in real time. But here's where most people get tripped up. They expect their emotions to speak in the same language as their thoughts. Emotions don't deliver PowerPoint presentations with bullet points and logical conclusions. They communicate through sensations, energy shifts, sudden insights, and what we often dismiss as just intuition. Learning to trust this guidance requires practice, especially if you've spent years training yourself to ignore it. Start small. Instead of immediately analyzing every feeling that comes up, try just sitting with it for a moment. What does this emotion feel like in your body? Where do you notice it most strongly? What happens if you breathe into that sensation instead of trying to think your way through it? You'll probably discover that emotions, when you actually pay attention to them, are far more nuanced and informative than the simplistic categories your brain likes to create. There's a difference between the anger that comes from being disrespected and the anger that comes from being scared. There's a difference between sadness about loss and sadness about betrayal. Your emotional intelligence can learn to distinguish between these subtle variations and understand their specific messages. The ultimate test of whether you're listening to emotional truth versus mental fiction is this. Emotional truth, even when it's uncomfortable, tends to create a sense of relief when you acknowledge it. There's something that relaxes in your system when you finally admit what you're actually feeling, even if it's inconvenient or challenging. Mental stories, on the other hand, even when they sound perfectly logical, often leave you feeling more tense, more confused, or strangely empty. It's like your soul knows the difference between authentic truth and clever rationalization, even when your conscious mind gets fooled. Here's what I want you to try for the next week. Before making any significant decision, pause and ask yourself 2 questions. First, what is my brain telling me I should do and why? Write down all the logical arguments, the practical considerations, the rational analysis. Then ask, what does this decision feel like in my body right now? Notice the difference between these 2 sources of information. You might be surprised to discover how often they're pointing in completely different directions. Your brain might be telling you to take the promotion because it's more money and better for your career, while your emotions are telling you that this particular role would drain your creative energy and compromise your values. Your brain might be telling you to stay in the relationship because you've invested so much time and you have so much in common, while your emotions are telling you that you haven't felt genuinely excited to see this person in months. Neither source of information is inherently right or wrong, but they're giving you different types of data. Your brain is running calculations based on external metrics and social programming. Your emotions are giving you feedback about alignment, authenticity, and what actually nourishes your deepest self. The people who create lives they truly love, who build relationships that actually fulfill them, who pursue work that energizes rather than depletes them, aren't necessarily smarter or more logical than everyone else. They've just learned to decode and trust their emotional guidance system while using their analytical minds as tools rather than masters. Your brain will always have opinions about what you should do with your life, but your emotions know what you actually need to thrive. The question is, which voice are you going to start listening to? The next time you feel that familiar tug of war between what makes sense and what feels right, remember this. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, but your emotions are trying to keep you alive. There's a difference between surviving and actually living, between existing and truly flourishing. Your emotions are the bridge between who you've been told to be and who you actually are. Stop letting your brain talk you out of your own life. Start listening to the truth that your emotions have been trying to tell you all along, because the person you become when you finally stop lying to yourself, that's the person you were always meant to be.